Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is December 22nd, 2025. Welcome to episode 326 of the Big Sky Astrology podcast. I'd like to begin with a note that there will be no episode of the podcast next Monday, December 29th. I'm taking a little time off between Christmas and New Year's, and I figured some of you might be doing the same. So let's catch up with a new episode on Monday, January 5th. And until then, enjoy your holidays. This week, quieter skies, as the universe also gives us a little bit of a holiday reprieve. Venus and Neptune challenge our beliefs about relationships and our values. Venus puts on her investor hat as she goes to work in Capricorn. There is a sizzling first quarter moon in Aries, and I answer a listener question about how AI may impact the field of astrology. Venus squares Neptune on Tuesday, December 23rd at 9:31 p.m. Pacific Time. It is at 29 degrees 25 minutes, Sagittarius and Pisces. Typically, when we see aspects between Venus and Neptune, there is potentially a lack of clarity in the Venus areas of our lives. Those are areas like relationship or finances or our values. When there's a square aspect specifically between Venus and Neptune, we often come to an awareness about a person or the nature of a relationship, something we hadn't realized before. A square aspect tends to cut through the Neptunian fog and reveal the truth. We can achieve some clarity. So that is a possibility for this week, especially around Tuesday. If there's a relationship you've been involved in, and you've been wondering if there's something there that isn't quite right, but you can't quite put your finger on it, this square might clear that up for you. Finances are also symbolized by Venus. So when Venus is square Neptune, there might be something about money that gets cleared up. Maybe we lent somebody some cash, and maybe we've made a lot of excuses for them as to why they have not yet returned it. There might be things that we've been wanting to buy, and suddenly we have an epiphany and realize maybe that it's not something we really need, and possibly it's not even something we really want. At the end of this transit, we should have a better idea about who we're with, what we want, and what we're worth. Because Venus is connected with our values and with our self-worth. This is a good time to begin to let go of the things and people that drain us. Neptune can have a very draining influence, and we've already gone through a number of square aspects to Neptune over the past week or two. The Sun made a square to Neptune, Mars squared Neptune, and we're probably a little tired as a result of all that. So there's been a little bit of a Neptune leak in our charts, and we may be feeling a little tired and like we need a break. We might need a little bit of a rest from the confusion of being around people, especially those who don't necessarily fit with who we are. On Wednesday, December 24th, at 8:26 a.m. Pacific Time, Venus enters the sign of Capricorn, and it'll be in this sign until January 17th, 2026. This is, of course, Christmas Eve for those who are celebrating that holiday, and Venus in Capricorn is a little more serious sign for Venus. It's not quite as merry or cheerful as we normally associate Venus as being, especially when it was in Sagittarius, its previous sign. Now that is a sign that loves a party. It loves to decorate. It loves to celebrate. Now Venus goes into Capricorn, and it doesn't particularly love celebrating. It will celebrate with family. It might do a little obligatory socializing with colleagues. And there is a sense with Venus in Capricorn that we may be celebrating or going to things or getting together for a meal out of obligation rather than pure joy. Venus will continue to be in Capricorn for several weeks, and it has a lot to say about how we're dealing with money and our relationships with other people. Venus in Capricorn is particularly attuned to the financial dimensions of Venus, and in particular things like investments, portfolios, mortgages, business. These are the kinds of areas that we tend to want to give a little more love and attention to during Venus in Capricorn season. When it comes to Venus in Capricorn, I'm often reminded of my sister, who was born with this Venus placement. And something that she really enjoyed when she was younger was architecture. She used to have a big book of blueprints for houses that she kept on her coffee table. I mean, I have Venus in Cancer, so I'm really interested in my home, but the structure of things is what Venus in Capricorn often really enjoys. She can look at a blueprint and see a house that has already been built. So Venus in Capricorn does love the fundamentals and the structures of things. It looks underneath the surface of whatever it's looking at to see not what's on top, not what's on the surface, but what are the underpinnings? How was it created? What makes it sturdy and long-lasting? The same is true of relationships. Venus in Capricorn is usually not terribly sentimental. It wants relationships that are stable and solid, based on shared values, shared goals. During this season, relationships often take a turn into something serious, even an engagement or a marriage. And now it's time for the moon report. And we begin, as always, with the week's major lunation. This week, that's the Aries first quarter moon on Saturday, December 27th at 11:10 a.m. Pacific time. That's at 6 degrees 17 minutes, Aries and Capricorn. This is the first action point in the new moon cycle that began on December 19th with that new moon in Sagittarius. The first quarter moon demands that we take action on whatever it was that we were imagining or planning at that new moon. What was the adventure that we were imagining that we would like to take? For example, with the new moon in Sagittarius. And the first quarter moon says, well, now is the time to take some kind of action toward whatever goals you were envisioning at that new moon. So let's say you thought at that new moon, I would love to go back to school and get an advanced degree. That would very much be of the nature of Sagittarius. At the first quarter moon, you might begin researching graduate programs and decide where the subject that you're interested in is being offered and what would be involved in getting registered in a program like that. Realistically, how long would it take you to complete it? This moon in Aries is in a conjunction with Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. And that could mean that at this first quarter, we're not really clear about the road forward. And always with the first quarter moon, I say that we're taking some kind of action that is really just a leap of faith. It's only been a week since the new moon, and since we were thinking about what we might want to do with that, this moon is still very close to Neptune. So it has energy, usually, moon in Aries, but not a ton of clarity. So proceed accordingly. Yes, take action. That's the joy of the first quarter moon, especially in Aries. But know that you're not completely seeing the whole picture, and build in some contingency plans to whatever it is that you're thinking about doing. The moon is also square Venus and Mars, as well as the sun in Capricorn. So there's a contradiction that is inherent in a square. And Mars in Capricorn is the ruler of this Aries moon. So at the same time, the moon's conjunction to Neptune is saying, hey, slow down a little bit. Don't do anything you can't undo. And Mars in Capricorn is saying, planning is of the utmost importance. That's one of the great talents of Mars in Capricorn, is it can work things out. So take your time and make sure you're considering things before you just go dashing off to get something done. This is the first quarter in a lunar phase family cycle that began with the new moon of March 29th, 2025. That was at 9 degrees Aries. And it actually was a solar eclipse. We're carrying that eclipse now through the 3-year lunar phase family cycle. And this first quarter is not just about how we're going to take action on what we were thinking about at the Sagittarius new moon on December 19th, but also what we put in place at that eclipse on March 29th, 2025. The full moon in this cycle comes on September 26, 2026, at 3 degrees 37 minutes Aries. And then the last quarter in this phase family is on June 26, 2027, at 5 degrees 21 minutes Aries. So that is the Aries eclipse cycle that we're working through for a total of 3 years. Look to the Aries house of your chart, and especially the one that has 9 degrees Aries in it. That's where this lunar cycle began. And think, how do you behave in this area of your life? Probably kind of impulsively, possibly with a lot of energy and daring. And you probably prefer to act alone in this area of your life. So this is the nature of this lunar phase family cycle that we are currently going through. Let's look at the void of course moon periods for this week. On December 22nd, the moon in Capricorn sextiles Neptune in Pisces at 6:44 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 1 hour, 8 minutes, and then enters Aquarius at 7:52 a.m. There is an opportunity that comes when we have the moon sextile another planet as it's going void of course. The structures that I talked about before that the moon in Capricorn desires are not necessarily going to be available to us because Neptune doesn't deal in the world of structures and reality. Rather, this moon in Capricorn can support Neptune in Pisces, meaning support our dreams, our imaginations, and what it is that we dream of accomplishing. The moon in Capricorn can provide the stability for moving in those directions. Use this void of course moon period to get in the habit of going with the flow, which is of the nature of Neptune in Pisces, instead of insisting that your way is the best and, in fact, the only way. This could also help your spiritual practice. Consider centering yourself through a ritual, meditation, or through movements such as dance or yoga. On December 24th, the moon in Aquarius squares Uranus at 1:42 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 3 hours and 27 minutes and then enters Pisces at 5:09 p.m. This is Christmas Eve, and there is a conflict here between the moon and another planet as it's going void of course. So there might be an unexpected desire to Introduce a new holiday tradition. Use this void of course period to get in the habit of letting down your guard when it comes to traditions and to be willing to welcome something fresh and new, maybe even something a little bit innovative. We can all become a little hidebound when it comes to holiday traditions. And for some of us, we feel more strongly about certain holidays than others. If this is one you care about a lot, and you have very particular traditions that you associate with it, know that they won't necessarily come off that way. And try to be willing to be a little more flexible and to accept new traditions that can occasionally come along. And none of them feel like traditions at first because it's the first time we're doing them. Try to welcome anything new at this holiday as being the opening of a window to let some fresh air in. And on December 26th, the moon in Pisces makes a conjunction with Neptune at 11:03 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 59 minutes and then enters Aries on December 27th at 12:02 a.m. Intuition will be especially strong during this combination. If you're asleep at this hour, expect to have some pretty lively dreams. If you're awake, your feelings could actually be quite overwhelming. And if you have a habit of numbing yourself with drugs or alcohol or too much rich food, that would absolutely be a step in the wrong direction at this void of course period. Instead, try to indulge in some of the more pleasant expressions of Neptune and Pisces. Take a lovely bath, listen to music, or even watch a sentimental movie. Use this void of course moon period to get in the habit of some healthy escapism. In this week's listener question, listener Elizabeth writes, AI has been all over the news these days, so it got me wondering, how do you see AI impacting the astrology field? Do you think more people will start relying on AI for readings? And if so, what might they miss out on by not working with a real-life astrologer like you? I'm curious what you feel human astrologers uniquely offer that AI can't replicate. I look forward to listening to your podcast on my Monday morning runs. Makes the miles fly by. Elizabeth, thank you so much for that and for your wonderful question. Boy, AI does seem to be one of the main topics of interest in the news, doesn't it? Even when I get together with my friends or my colleagues even, the subject inevitably turns to AI. Most everyone admits to using it for things that don't require any particular creativity or individuality. And personally, I would much rather dip into my limited reserve of creativity to write my columns, create my podcast, to create the artwork for my website, than for putting together an advertising blurb for a class or doing a bunch of internet searches of historical events that happened under a particular transit or something like that, as I often end up doing for classes or lectures. AI does a wonderful job of all of that for me and of creating outlines to provide a structure for creating a class or a lecture. In fact, those are the kinds of things that exhaust me and make it harder for me to do the creative parts of my work. Now, I assume people are already using AI for readings to some degree. In my experience, you need to give an AI platform all of the salient information of a chart, all of the planetary sign and house placements, aspects to other planets. Because at least in the platforms that I've tried, you can't just give AI a person's birth data and expect it to calculate a chart. I'm sure that's coming, but it does not seem to be here quite yet. Now, that said, aren't the calculation tools we use to calculate a chart essentially a kind of AI? Although I know how to calculate a chart by hand, I don't see any particular value in doing that on a regular basis versus just using my astrology software. And I have to confess, I'm also guilty of having ChatGPT give me short, one-card tarot readings, and they're usually very insightful. But there is a wonderful professional tarot reader that I've gone to over the years when I needed a real in-depth, insightful reading. And the reasons I go to her might prove insightful when it comes to the part of your question about what human astrologers can offer in a reading that AI can't. I go to her when I need not just a description or a delineation of individual cards or even a sequence of cards, but also a holistic view of a particular situation, such as maybe a conflict with a person in my life. I would want to know what she in particular has to say about these situations, not just as a card reader, but as a human, because I connect with her and I trust her opinion. And talking with her helps me clarify my own perspective. I enjoy my little ChatGPT readings, but that's what I don't get from them. If I had a big, complicated situation that I wanted some input about, I would go to my actual person for that. So I imagine it's going to be roughly the same, possibly it already is the same, for those who are seeking astrology advice. In fact, for years, I've already been selling automated reports about astrology that are based on an individual's birth chart. They're connected to my astrology calculation software, which basically tells the report exactly what information to include. The texts for these reports are written by astrologers I trust, whose work I love. And I think that these reports are a wonderful solution for people who just don't have the money to pay for an actual reading with an astrologer. But I suspect there will continue to be those moments, as there are now, when a person doesn't just want the astrology, but really wants an interaction with a person, and in many cases, a very specific person. There's something to be said for the synastry of a client's chart with an astrologer's chart that gives a unique tenor to the conversation. Something about the way a specific person approaches and interprets your chart and connects with you that you can't really get anywhere else. That's what an astrologer can offer that AI can't. Their very particular experience, personality, training, even their own birth chart. Elizabeth, what a great question. Thank you. I hope this has given you a way of looking at this topic that is helpful. And if you have a burning question about astrology that you'd like me to answer on a future episode, leave a voicemail of 1 minute or less at speakpipe.com/Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Or you can just email me at april@bigskyastrology.com and be sure to put podcast question in the subject line. That is everything on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe or follow the show in your app of choice. Leave a rating or a review, And I hope that you'll help spread the word by telling an astrology-loving friend about the podcast. You can read show notes and transcripts and leave your comments about each episode at bigskyastropod.com. Thank you so much to everyone who's shown support for the podcast over the years, and in particular during my September Podathon. On each episode, I'm thanking some of my financial donors by name. This week, let's give a Big Sky Astrology podcast shout out to Mercedes Abraham and Buzzy Orr. Buzzy and Mercedes, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for supporting the show with your donations. If you would like to support the show and receive access to my bonus video episodes for donors only, please go to bigskyastropod.com and make a contribution of $10 or more. You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become an ongoing monthly contributor. That is it for this episode. Join me again bright and early 2 weeks from today. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars. And very happy holidays to you.